Good day! We are the Group 2 and we will be discussing the basis and policies of special and inclusive education. First is the special and inclusive education. May layunin sila na tulungan yung mga batang with special needs kung saan ang lahat ng estudyante ay makakaramdam na belong sila sa klase at sama-samang mag-i-improve yung mga kaalaman nila at yung edukasyon ng bawat isa. Sinusulong nila ang equal opportunities para sa lahat ng mga mag-aaral. Psychological basis of special and inclusive education. Ito ay nag-uugat para malaman at maunawaan ang mga cognitive, emotional, and social needs ng mga mag-aaral. Kasama rin dito ang iba't ibang mga approaches sa pagtuturo para malaman yung mga unique na kakayahan ng mga batang may special needs. Ang una rito ay ang individualized support kung saan tinutugunan nito yung mga learning styles, strengths, at challenges ng bawat mag-aaral. Binibigyang daan din nito ang mga mag-aaral na may special needs na magkaroon ng pagpapasya sa sarili, maging malaya, maging produktibo, at maisama at mapabilang sa lahat ng aspeto ng buhay komunidad. Ang pangalawa naman ay ang inclusive mindset, kung saan binigyan nila ng magandang environment ang mga batang may special needs to promote inclusivity wherein mararamdaman nila na hindi sila kakaiba kundi kabilang sila sa iba pang mga bata at mahalaga sila. Ang pangatlo naman ay ang positive reinforcement, wherein magpapatupad sila ng mga positive strategies para makatulong na mag-create ng magandang environment sa pag-aaral ng mga bata. Kapag kasi maganda or safe yung learning atmosphere ng mga students, mataas yung possibility na mag-improve yung self-esteem nila at magkaroon sila ng motivation para tumuloy sa pag-aaral.
Number 4 is collaborative learning, encouraging peer interactions and collaboration to promote social development and a sense of belonging. So dito, mas maganda daw na mayroong collaborative learning sapagkat dito napipili ng isang mag-aaral na tanggap siya at walang diskriminasyon na ipinakikita ang kanyang mga kaklase sa kanya. So the number 5 is early intervention. Recognizing and addressing challenges early to provide timely and effective intervention for optimal psychological development. So dito naman sa early intervention, sinasabi dito na mas magandang maagapan agad ang mga suliranin sapagkat ito ay magkakaroon ng masamang epekto kung hindi maaagapan. Kaya naman, kailangan ng early intervention upang mapaunlad palalo ang psychological na pag-unlad. Policy of special and inclusive education. So, the policy framework for special and inclusive education involves guidelines and equitable access to qualify education for all learners. Key components include the first one is the legal mandates, establishing legal frameworks such as the Individuals with Disability Education Act in the US or similar acts in other countries, ensuring the rights of students with disabilities. Dito po ay meron nga pong batas na umiiral para sa ating mga mayroong disabilities na kung saan pinapahalagahan nito ang pagkakaroon nila ng edukasyon kahit na meron silang disabilities. Inadapt ito o nagsimula ito noong 1990 sa bansang Amerika na kung saan inadapt ng ibang bansa.
Promoting policies that encourage inclusive practices in mainstream educational settings, facilitating the integration of students with special needs. So, dito ay dapat pinapanatili ang pagtiyak na ang lahat ng mga mag-aaral, anuman ang kanilang kakayanan, pinagmulan o pagkakaiba ay binibigyan ng pantay na pagkakataon upang matuto at lumahok sa lahat ng aspeto ng buhay paaralan. Kumbaga, sa isang classroom ay lahat sabay-sabay na uunlad. Kabilang dito ang paglikha ng mga kapaligiran na nakakapagpasigla sa pag-aaral, paggamit ng magkakaibang diskarte sa pagtuturo upang mapaunlakan ng iba't ibang mga estilo ng pag-aaral. pagtataguyod ng mga positibong saloobin at paggalang sa pagkakaiba-iba, pagtataguyod ng pakipagtulungan sa mga mag-aaral at pagbibigay ng naangkop na serbisyo sa suporta at mga akomodasyon. So number 3, policies focus on allocating resources, both human and material, to support the diverse needs of the students, including the specialized teachers, assistive technologies, and accessible facilities. So dito sa policy nito, hindi dapat sa facilities ibinubuhos lahat ng budget, pero dapat kasama rin sa plano ang mga magiging guro. Ang paglalaan na mapagkukunan sa isang inklusibong silid-aralan ay mahalaga upang matiyak na ang lahat ng mga mag-aaral, anuman ang kanilang mga kakayanan o pangangailangan, ay may akses sa kinakailangang suporta at mga materyales upang maibigay ang pinakamainam para sa mga bata. Nakakatulong ito sa pagtugon sa magkakaibang estilo ng pag-aaral, paghahanap ng mga individual na pagkakaiba at pagtataguyod ng katarungan sa edukasyon. Ang wastong paglalaan ng mga mapagkukunan ay maaaring mapadali ang personalized na pagtuturo, mga teknolohiyang ginagamit sa pagtuturo, at pwede ring magamit ito sa paggawa ng mga IMs na talaga namang na makukuha ang atensyon ng mga bata at maiaayon ang pangangailangan ng mga bata. Ito ay nagpapatibay ng isang kapaligiran kung saan ang bawat mag-aaral ay umuunlad. So number 4, emphasizing ongoing professional development for educators to enhance their skills in catering to diverse learning needs. So dapat professional ang guro na mamamahala sa mga estudyante. Dapat mayroon siyang respeto, talino, at higit sa lahat, pagmamahal sa kanyang estudyante at sa kanyang trabaho. Dapat din ay kasama siya sa mga seminar na isinasagawa upang mas mapalawig pa ang kaalaman sa pagtuturo sa inclusive na edukasyon. Dapat professional din siya sa paggamit ng mga salita at dapat isinasa-isip muna niya ang dapat bitawan na salita. Mahalaga na ibigay sa mga bata ang kahalagahan ng ligtas na lugar kung saan matututo sila ng maraming bagay.
Parental involvement, encouraging policies that actively involve parents in the educational process, recognizing their crucial role in supporting the development of their children. So here it is important to involve the parents in the educational process since their participation is very important when it comes to decision making. We know that parents have a strong influence on their children. For this reason, a parent's positive attitude and support towards their children's education is considerable. Besides promoting student success, parental involvement in a child's education is beneficial to the teachers and for the parents. It builds a positive relationship characterized by mutual respect. They're able to work together to promote students' learning and also their performance. Last is the assessment and evaluation. So here, it established fair and inclusive assessment methods that consider diverse abilities and provide accurate representations of each student's progress. In terms of measuring the student's progress, it is important to go beyond the traditional methods to recognize and address the unique needs of all the learners. It also aims to provide fair and accurate assessment that truly measures the students' learning regardless of their background, ability, or learning styles. Inclusive assessment is about creating a level playing field where all students have the opportunity to demonstrate their understanding. So, it recognizes that learning can be expressed in a multitude of ways, moving beyond the confines of a single test format.
These are the strategies that we can use for inclusive assessment, such as the differentiation to cater to the individual needs and learning styles, provide graphic organizers for visual learners, audio recordings for auditory learners, and extended time for students who need it, self and peer assessment, and also summative and formative, and etc. So, the combination of strong psychological foundation and well-defined policies ensures that a special and inclusive education goes beyond mere accommodation, striving to create an environment that nurtures the holistic development of every learners. So dito, mahalaga na mayroon strong foundation when it comes to psychological and policies for special inclusive education para mas ma-accommodate yung mga needs and ng mga students para mas ma-develop pa yung kanilang mga holistic ability, which are the physical, intellectual, emotional, cognitive, and also their social abilities. It seeks to enhance these skills in the early stage of life, which will prepare them to meet the challenges and difficulties of daily life in the near future. Next is the psychological basis of special and inclusive education. Involves understanding the diverse needs of learners, tailoring approaches of those with special needs. Key aspects includes individualized support, fostering inclusivity, positive reinforcement, collaborative learning, and early intervention. So dito, mas naunawaan kung ano ba yung mga needs ng mga learners. Nare-recognize yung unique set of strengths ng mga bata, also their learning styles and perspectives. By fostering an environment that celebrates differences and provided support, inclusive classroom empowers students of all abilities to reach their full potential. And may mga key aspect na pwedeng magamit for educational process, which are the individualized support, fostering inclusivity, positive reinforcement, collaborative learning, and early intervention. Lastly is the policy framework for special and inclusive education that ensures equitable access to quality education. This involves legal mandates promoting inclusive practices, resource allocation, professional development, parental involvement, and fair assessment methods. The goal is to create an environment that supports the holistic development of learner. So the Department of Education is mandated to protect and promote the rights of every Filipino citizen to quality education that will enable each learner to realize their full potential and take part in nation building. So it promotes the implementation of programs that address the various physical, intellectual, psychosocial, and cultural needs of learners in diverse contacts. So these programs are anchored on inclusion, which is a core principle of the Enhanced Basic Education Program, DepEd Order number 43 series of 2013. So this aim of an inclusive education environment that ensures that all students are treated fairly and get equal opportunities. Within an inclusive education environment, students' diversity and uniqueness should be celebrated without any discrimination.
Good day everyone, I am Jose Virgilio Bugarin and I am here to discuss about the philosophical basis of special and inclusive education. So what is the philosophical basis of inclusive and special education? Okay, is rooted in a commitment to equality, diversity, and the recognition of the inherent worth and potential of every individual, regardless of their abilities, background, and differences. So, it means na kahit ano man ang kanilang pagkakaiba, pagkakakilanlan, o pinagmulan, so kailangan natin pahalagahan o itrato ng tama ang mga special student. And kailangan pantay-pantay yung tingin natin sa mga special student. And this approach challenges traditional notion of education that may exclude certain group of students and advocate for a more inclusive and accommodating learning environment. The traditional notion of education ay binibigyan na magkaroon o ma-exclude yung mga certain group of student with special disabilities. Then dito rin nagkakaroon ng advocate and nagkakaroon ng more inclusive learning environment para sa mga special student. And several philosophical perspective contribute to the foundation of inclusive and special education. So meron tayong human rights and social justice. So the philosophical foundation, the principle of human rights and social justice underpin the philosophy of inclusive education. Advocates argue that every individual, regardless of their abilities or disabilities, has a right to education that facilitate their full participation in society. When we say human rights is karapatang pang-tao and social justice is katarungang panlipunan. So because of that, mas lalong pinagtitibay yung philosophy of inclusive education. So it's advocate na ang bawat individual anuman ang kanilang kakayahan o kapansanan ay meron silang karapatang pang edukasyon o meron silang karapatang makapag-aral na kung saan makakapag-participate sila sa society. This perspective promotes the idea that inclusive education is not just a matter of pedagogy but a fundamental human rights, challenging discriminatory practices and promoting the idea that education should accessible to everyone. It means this perspective o ang pananaw na ito ay nagtataguyod ng idea na ang inklusibong education ay hindi lamang isang usaping pedagogy, kundi isang pangunahing karapatang pang-tao o human rights. So, humahamon din ito sa mga iba't ibang kasanayang pang-discrimination at nagsusulong ng iba't ibang idea na ang edukasyon ay hindi lamang na ang edukasyon ay dapat na magagamit ng lahat ng bawat isa sa atin.
So now, let's proceed to the equality and equity. So, inclusive education is also grounded with this philosophical basis, which is the equality and equity. So, what do we mean by equality? So, equality is giving the same thing to all of your students. So, one example here is that giving the same activities to the students, regardless of their conditions, of their disabilities. And now, when it comes to equity, it is giving an activity with consideration. And then, syempre, pagbibigay mo ng attention talaga sa mga nangangailangan. For example, you have a student na putol yung paa, so you are going to think another activity for that student. Para hindi, alam niyo yun, para hindi niya maramdaman na, ay, hindi ko to kaya tong activity na to, wala na, bagsak na ako. Hindi ganun. Dapat as a teacher, you're going to think a plan B or another activity for that student. And then, its implication, magkakaroon ng diverse learning sa loob ng classroom. And then, marireach mo lahat ng student mo regardless of their conditions, of their disabilities. Kasi doon pa lang, sa pag-iisip mo ng activity na magsusut sa kanila, mararamdaman na nila na they are welcome and then they can freely express themselves without thinking na bababa yung confidence nila kasi hindi nila magawa tong activities na to. Pero not all the time, gagamitin natin ng equality or yung equity. Siyempre, titingnan pa rin natin kung ano yung pangangailangan ng mga student natin. When it comes sa mga physical activities, of course, we need to consider their conditions. Dapat, pag magagawa tayo ng mga activities, yung accessible sa lahat. And then, when it comes naman sa equality, syempre hindi naman, para maiwasan natin yung mindset ng mga student ng favoritism. Ayan. With that, equality and equity will serve as a motivation din sa mga student natin to do our activity and to participate to the class.
Diversity and multiculturalism. Philosophical foundation. The philosophy of inclusive education embraces diversity and multiculturalism. It recognizes and values differences in abilities, cultural backgrounds, language, and learning styles. So, sinasabi po dito na yung philosophical foundation po ng inclusive education is nakakapag-embrace po siya ng diversity and multiculturalism na kung saan nare-recognize yung values ng mga differences ng mga may abilities, katulad na lang po ng mga cultural backgrounds nila, yung languages na kanilang ginagamit, and learning styles. And yung implication naman po ng diversity and multiculturalism is, in practice, this means fostering an inclusive curriculum that reflects diverse perspectives, providing support for students with different cultural and linguistic backgrounds, and creating an environment that celebrates differences rather than stigmatize them. Yung implication naman daw po ng diversity and culturalism is nangangahulugan na yung isang inclusive curriculum is sumasalamin po sa magkakaibang pananaw. And dahil po doon is nakakapagbigay po ng suporta yung inclusive curriculum sa mga students na nag-aaral sa iba't ibang kultura or sa mga linguistic na background na kanilang ginagamit. And dahil po dito is nakakalikha po sila or nakaka-create po sila na nagse-celebrate po sila dahil po parang nagkakasundo-sundo po sila ay nagkakaisa imbes na nagkakasiraan po sila dahil po sa kanilang kondisyon or dahil po meron po silang mga abilities.
Holistic and person-centered approaches. In philosophical foundation, inclusive education is often guided by holistic and person-centered philosophies, focusing on the overall development of each individual rather than just the academic achievement. In implications, this approach involves recognizing and addressing the unique strengths, interests, and challenges of each student. It calls for personalized learning plans and collaborative efforts among educators, parents, and specialists to support the holistic development of every learner. To further elaborate, an approach to education known as holistic education emphasizes the whole person rather than simply their intellectual or their academic success. One of the main principles of holistic education is that learning should have meaning and relevance for students. Person-centered education focuses on the development of connections that are supportive and characterized by sincerity, empathy, and respect. Holistic approaches to child development and learning recognize the connectedness of mind, body, and spirit. When early learning and child care workers take a holistic approach, they pay attention to children's physical, personal, social, emotional, and spiritual well-being, as well as cognitive aspects of learning.
Another philosophical perspective that contributed to the foundation of inclusive and special education is the social constructivism. Ano nga ba si social constructivism? It is a cognitive theory that highlights collaboration in learning. It is a sociological ideology focusing on how humans learn and survive in a constantly changing society. Ito ay nakatuon sa kung paano natututo at nabubuhay ang mga tao sa patuloy na nagbabagong lipunan o ginagalawang mundo. The principles of social constructivism were developed by psychologist Lev Vygotsky in 1968. Social constructivism is significantly interrelated to communication, observation, and environments. Vygotsky advocated that learning thrives the most in social and cultural settings rather than individually. Sinasabi na sa social constructivism, it emphasizes that learning is created most in social or through interaction kaysa on our own lang. Vygotsky believed that knowledge is created or rather constructed through human connection and that individuals create purpose from their interactions. Paulit-ulit na binabanggit ang interaction, which means social or socially. Wherein in inclusive education, it promotes diversity. Ano nga ba yung diversity? Yun yung practice or quality of including or involving people regardless of racial, ethnic, socioeconomic, and cultural backgrounds, and various lifestyle experiences and interests. Students with diverse abilities learn together, promoting social interactions, empathy, and mutual understanding. And dito sa social constructivism, this is the view that learning occurs through social interaction and the help of others or often in a group. So this philosophy supports and is aligned to the goals of inclusive and special education that also emphasizes the importance of social interactions and collaborative learning.
So now let's talk about the ethics of care. So what is the philosophical foundation of this? The ethics of care emphasizes the relationship, empathy, and the moral responsibility to take care of the others. So what is the implication of this in the inclusive education? In inclusive and special education, the ethics of care encourage the educator to understand and respond to the unique needs of each student, fostering a supportive and compassionate learning environment. So, some example of the ethics of care that the teachers may apply are confidentiality, informed consent, privacy, fairness, and non-discrimination. So, to summary our topic, the topic that we discussed about the philosophical basis of inclusive and special is multifaceted drawing of human rights, equality, diversity, and person-centered approaches. It seeks to challenge societal norms, eliminate discrimination, and create educational environment that empower all individuals to reach their full potentials.
Historical basis of special and inclusive education. The historical development of special and inclusive education is complex and has evolved over time in response to changing societal attitudes, educational philosophies, and legal frameworks. Siyempre, habang patuloy na umuusbong ang panahon, may pagbabago din sa pagtrato ng mga tao sa mga people with disabilities. So here is a comprehensive discussion of the historical basis of special and inclusive education. So first is during ancient and medieval period. Historically, individuals with disabilities were often marginalized or excluded from mainstream societies. Ancient civilizations like Greece and Rome had limited provisions for individuals with disabilities, and societal perceptions often stigmatized them. So, during ancient period, yung mga tao na may kapansanan, parang nale-left out sila wherein hindi sila tinuturing na kasapi sa kanilang lipunan. Then, sa ancient civilization tulad ng Greece and Rome, limitado lang yung nabibigay nilang tulong o suporta para sa mga ito. During this time din, parang kapag may PWD sa kanila, parang kahihiyan sa kanila. So, hindi talaga maganda yung trato sa mga people with disabilities sa ancient period. So, during medieval period naman, people with disabilities were often associated with supernatural beliefs or viewed as a burden to society. Sa medieval period, nakikita or tinuturing nila yung mga people with disabilities na pabigat lang sa kanilang lipunan dahil nga para sa kanila, parang walang kakayahan na gawin ng mga PWD ang kayang gawin ng normal na tao.
The Renaissance marked a shift in thinking, emphasizing humanism and individual worth. However, these ideas did not immediately translate into inclusive practices for individuals with disabilities. Era of Asylum. During the Renaissance period, the Catholic Church began accepting persons with disabilities as wards of state. This was the start of the human treatment given to them that they were taken cared for, albeit in isolation. However, the belief that once disabled, always disabled rendered these individuals as uneducable. So, at the beginning, there were no education, but at least there were dealing with those with disabilities as humans. The history of special education begins with the 18th century. Before that time, persons with disabilities were not taken in consideration and were often mistaken as being possessed by evil powers, cursed, or simply stupid with the beginning of the 18th century. And also the period known as the Enlightenment ideas about education started. The Enlightenment period influenced special education in many ways. To start, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, year 1712 to 1778, publishes his email, a book about education of children. According to Rousseau, learning should happen in agreement with a child's cognitive speed with minimal outer stimuli from society, which is known for praising social roles and wealth. The Enlightenment era laid the groundwork for more rational and humanitarian views, but it took time for these ideas to permeate educational systems. Charles Michel Dewey, who was a philanthropic educator of 18th century France who has become known as the father of the deaf. Dewey then turned his attention toward charitable services for the poor and on one foray into the slums of Paris. He had a chance encounter with the two young deaf sisters who communicated using a sign language. Dewey decided to dedicate himself to the education and salvation of the deaf, and in 1760 he founded a school in line with emerging philosophical thought of the time. Dewey came to believe that the people were capable of language and concluded that they should be able to receive the sacraments and thus avoid going to hell. Using these methods, Hoare was able to educate a blind boy who later became a teacher in the same school. Another person who was also concerned with the education of people with special needs, Jean-Marc Gaspard Eaton, was considered with different methods in order to educate disabled children. He tried to educate a boy who was found in the wild for about 5 years. With no actual improvements, Eaton gave up on the attempt and let the boy go back to his wildlife. Still, his researchers and efforts were of great influence on the works of special education, especially in the United States. Whereas being taken care for can be considered as human treatment for persons with disability. A different perspective stipulates that without education there is no humanity. Thus, to reinforce equal treatment among all humans, one should have the right to education regardless of his or her disability. This led some individuals to devise ways to deliver education to those with disabilities and thus the start of the development of special and inclusive education.
Now, to continue the discussion about the historical basis of special and inclusive education, let us proceed with the 19th century. So, the 19th century saw the emergence of institutions for individuals with disabilities. While some were well-intentioned attempts to provide care and education, others became overcrowded and lacked proper resources. So, ibig sabihin, in the 19th century, medyo umuusbong na yung pagkakaroon ng special and inclusive education. So, the first individual help provided for disabled children was in 1913. Also, may mga books din na lumalabas para mas maintindihan ng mga tao what is special education. So, some of these books nga is Children Who Vary from the Normal Type, Special Education in Boston, 1883 to 1930 by Robert Osgood. Another book is about special education in America. It's Legal and Governmental Foundation, edited by Ballard Ramirez and Wenthrop. So, pioneering educators like Samuel Gridley Ho and Jean-Marc Gaspard Itard make significant contributions to the education of individuals with specific disabilities. So, Gridley Ho founded schools for children with intellectual disabilities in 1948 and deaf children in 1967. So, Samuel Gridley ay nagturo na with people with disabilities. So, he opposed sign language. So, hindi siya dun sa sign language. Instead, he preferred to teach lip reading and oral communication. He also developed Boston Line Type in 1835. So, ito yung system na tinatawag na oral communication. Then, for Jean-Marc Gaspard Itard, he is noted for his work with deaf mutes and was one of the first to attempt education of mentally retarded children in a systematic fashion. So, he worked with Victor the Wild Boy of Aveyron. So, Victor, ito yung sinasabi nila na feral child. What is feral child? Feral child is the one who grow up isolated from the laws and are able to pick up even readiness of human culture. So parang retarded person nga siya, pero naturuan siya ni Jean-Marc Gaspard Itard. So si Victor, nakapagsalita siya, nakapagbasa siya, and nakapagsulat siya ng iilang mga phrases and words. Pero masasabi na naturuan siya with the help of Jean-Marc. So, Itard efforts consider as an important early development in the special education with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
Early 20th century. So, the early 20th century witnessed a eugenics movement that advocated for selective breeding to eliminate disabilities, contributing to discriminatory practices. So, ano ba yung eugenics? So, eugenics is the scientifically erroneous and immoral theory of racial improvement and plant breeding. So, naging popular ito during the early 20th century. So, yung eugenics na nanggaling siya sa Greek word na well-born or good in birth. Kumbaga, yung mga tao noon is naniniwala sila na pwedeng gawing perfect ang mga tao at alisin or bawasan yung mga may sakit or disabilities na tao. So, sa pamamagitan ng genetics at heredity. So, ginagawa nila ito through selectively mating people with their specific desirable hereditary traits. So, next is, the work of Maria Montessori and others emphasize individualized instruction and recognize the diversity of learning needs, laying the groundwork for more inclusive educational approaches. So, si Maria Montessori is naniniwala siya na ang mga bata are naturally curious and capable of learning independently. So, yung mga bata is natututo sila throughout their curiosity. So, si Maria Montessori ay nag-develop siya ng Montessori method. So, naniniwala siya na ang education is dapat swak siya or nami-meet nito yung iba't ibang pangangailangan or interest ng mga bata.
So, to continue the discussion, I am Judith Nicanor, and now let's talk about the mid-20th century. So, during post-World War II, there was increased awareness and advocacy for the rights of individuals with disabilities. So, the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 set a precedent for inclusive education as a basic human right. So, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, or the UDHR, is a milestone document in the history of human rights. It was drafted by representatives with different legal and cultural backgrounds from all regions of the world. The declaration was proclaimed by United Nations General Assembly in Paris on December 10, 1948. So it was also known as the General Assembly Resolution 217A as a common standard achievements for all peoples and all nations.
It sets out for the first time the fundamental human rights to be universally protected, and it has been translated into over 500 languages. So the UDHR is widely recognized as having inspired and paved the way for the adoption of more than 70 human rights treaties applied today on a permanent basis at global and regional levels, meaning all containing references to it in their preambles. So, inscribed in the Universal Declaration on Human Rights that the education is a basic right. So, a range of declarations and conventions highlight the importance of education for people with disabilities. Now, let's move on to the 1954 Brown versus the Board of Education decision in the United States highlighted issues of segregation, but it is primarily focused on racial segregation rather than the disabilities. So it has a doctrine that states separate but equal. In 1896, the Supreme Court ruled in Plessy versus Ferguson that racially segregated public facilities were legal so long as the facilities for black people and whites are equal. So in the case that would become most famous, a plaintiff named Oliver Brown filed a class action suit against the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas in 1951 after his daughter, Linda Brown, was denied entrance to Topeka's all-white elementary schools. So the case went before the U.S. District Court in Kansas, which agreed that public school segregation had a detrimental effect upon the colored children and contributed to a sense of inferiority, but still upheld the separate but equal doctrine. So by overturning the separate but equal doctrine, the court's decision in Brown versus Board of Education had set the legal precedent that would be used to overturn laws enforcing segregation in other public facilities. But despite of its undoubted impact, the historic verdict fell short of achieving its primary mission of integrating the nation's public schools. So today, more than 60 years after Brown versus Board of Education, the debate continues over how to combat racial inequalities in the nation's school system, largely based on residential patterns and differences in resources between schools in wealthier and economically disadvantaged districts across the country.
Good day everyone, I am Jenny Peña and I am here to discuss about the late 20th century. The 1970s and 1980s witnessed a paradigm shift towards inclusive education. Legislation such as the Education for All Handicapped Children, that in 1975. In the U.S. mandated free appropriate education for all the children, laying the foundation for the individual with disabilities education. Act Ideas in 1990. Pag sinabi nating paradigm shift, ito yung pagkakaroon ng improvement sa isang bagay. Inclusion become a global movement with countries adopting policies to integrate students with disabilities into mainstream school. This happened on the late 20th century.
On 21st century, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities or CRPD in 2006 adopted by the United Nations further emphasized the rights and inclusion of individuals with disability in all aspects of life including education. Um, Conversion on the rights of persons with disabilities involve advocating for equal opportunities, accessibility, inclusion, and removal of barriers that hinder their full participation in society. It emphasizes it emphasizes areas such as employment, education, healthcare, transportation, and accessibilities to public spaces. Additionally, it includes discussion about legal protections, accommodations, and promoting awareness to challenge stereotypes and discrimination. Advances in technology and better understanding of diverse learning needs have facilitated more inclusive practices in education.
Next is the challenges and ongoing efforts of special and inclusive education. So why does the challenges remain or persist in education? It is due to various factors such as the need for continued advocacy because we need to address systemic issues. And next, we have the allocation of resources because it ensures equitable access to quality education. And last but not the least, we have the continuous professional development for educators because it adapts to evolving the pedagogical approaches and technologies. And these efforts are crucial for fostering an inclusive and effective learning environment for all the students. And the ongoing evolution of educational practices necessitates addressing both the physical accessibility and accommodating diverse learning styles because education should be inclusive and effective for all learners. And by ensuring the physical accessibility, such as providing resources for students with disabilities, the educational institution can create environments where all students have equal opportunities to learn. And additionally, adapting instructional methods to accommodate diverse learning styles ensures that students with different preferences and strengths can engage meaningfully with the material. And this approach fosters a more inclusive and effective learning environment, ultimately benefiting all the students. So, in conclusion, the historical basis of special and inclusive education reflects a gradual progression from exclusionary practices to recognize the rights and diverse needs of individuals with disabilities. And these followings are played a crucial roles in shaping the current landscape of special and inclusive educations. Those are the legal frameworks, societal attitudes, and educational philosophies. And the ongoing challenges is to foster truly inclusive educational environments that cater to the diverse needs of all the learners.
Legal basis of special and inclusive education. As of my last knowledge update in January 2022, the legal basis for special and inclusive education in the Philippines include several key laws and policies aimed at ensuring equal educational opportunities for all learners, including those with disabilities. Republic Act No. 7277, Magna Carta for Persons with Disabilities. This law declares the policy of the state to provide equal opportunities for persons with disabilities and to develop their full potential. It covers various aspects, including education, and mandates the government to ensure the PWDs have access to quality education. Sinasabi dito na kahit yung may mga disabilities ay kailangan meron pa rin silang equal opportunities para kung makapag-aral man sila ay mailabas nila yung galing nila kahit na may mga disabilities sila. Kasi para hindi sila mahiya kung na may ganun silang mga disabilities ay tanggap pa rin sila ng mga tao. Para kung sa ganun ay mailabas nila yung kanilang galing sa school at the same time ay hindi sila nahihiya na ipakita ito.
Republic Act No. 10533 Enhanced Basic Education Act of 2013, commonly known as the K-12 Law. This act extends the basic education cycle to 12 years and includes provisions for the educations of learners with special needs. It emphasizes inclusive education and recognizes the diverse learning needs of students. So, ang Republic Act No. 10533 o K-12 Law ay isang batas sa Pilipinas na nagpapahaba ng basic education mula 10 to 12 years. Layunin nito na magbigay ng mas malawak at kumpletong edukasyon sa mga mag-aaral. Kasama rin sa batas nito ang mga probisyon para sa edukasyon ng mga mag-aaral na may special needs, na ang ibig sabihin ng special needs ay is any of various difficulties such as physical, emotional, behavioral, or learning disabilities or impairment. Mahalaga rin sa batas na ito ang konsepto na inclusive education na nagbibigay halaga sa iba't ibang pangangailangan ng mga mag-aaral. Sa pamamagitan ng batas na ito, inaasahang mas magiging pantay at dekalidad ang edukasyon sa bansa.
DepEd Order Number 20 Series of 2012 is a set of rules for school to follow. It says that all school, whether public or private, should include students with different needs in their classroom. This means making sure that every student, including those with disabilities, can learn together in the same classes. Example, there is a school where there are students who use wheelchair, some who have trouble seeing, and others who find reading difficult. DepEd Order Number 20 Series of 2012 would mean that this school must make changes so that all students can learn together. For example, they might install ramps for students in wheelchair, provide big print book for those with vision problems, and offer extra help to students who struggle with reading. This way, every student gets the support they need to learn and succeed. Republic Act Number 10524 is like an update to a set of rules called Magna Carta for a person with disability. It focuses on making sure that people with disability have more chances to get jobs. It doesn't talk about school directly, but it's about making sure that everyone gets treated fairly, especially in getting work. For example, let's say before this law, only a few job positions were set aside for the people with disability. But with this law, more jobs can now be reserved for them, giving them better opportunity to work and earn a living.
The DepEd Order Number 70, Series of 2009, titled Inclusive Education for Children with Special Needs, is a policy issued by the Department of Education in the Philippines. It aims to promote inclusive education by providing equal opportunities for children with special needs to receive quality education in regular schools. The order defines inclusive education as the philosophy of accepting all children regardless of their race, size, shape, color, ability, or disability, with support from school staff, students, parents, and the community. It emphasizes the importance of creating an inclusive and tolerant society by bringing all students together in one classroom and community, regardless of their strengths and weaknesses in any area. The Republic Act Number 9442, also known as an Act amending Republic Act Number 7277, is a law in the Philippines that aims to enhance the mobility and participation of persons with disabilities or PWDs in society. It amends certain provision of Republic Act Number 7277, otherwise known as the Magna Carta for Persons with Disability. So it aims to promote the rights and welfare of PWDs in the Philippines by removing barriers and ensuring their full inclusion and participation in society. Also, it recognizes the importance of equal opportunities, accessibility, and non-discrimination for PWDs, allowing them to live with dignity and contribute to the development of the country. So, for example, in their education, special education programs, it is a law emphasize the importance of providing specialized educational programs and services for students with disabilities. So these educational institutions are encouraged to develop and implement individualized education plans, or the IEP, to address the specific learning needs of students with disabilities. So these programs may include adapted curriculum, modified teaching methods, and additional support services to ensure that students with disabilities can access and benefits from quality education.
DepEd Order Number 73 Series of 2012 implementing guidelines on the grant of 5% discount privilege on purchase of goods and services by person with disability. While not directly related to education, this order ensures that persons with disabilities, including students, are entitled to a discount on purchase of goods and services, which indirectly support their overall well-being, including educational needs. So, the DepEd Order Number 73 Series of 2012 is an order that provides guidelines for the implementation of the 5% discount privilege for persons with disability under purchase of goods and services. Although it may not be directly related to education, this order aims to support the overall well-being of the person with disability, including students, by providing them with financial assistance through discount. This indirectly supports their educational needs by making essential goods and services more affordable for them. It is crucial to note that the effectiveness of this legal provision depends on their proper implementation, which involve collaboration between government agencies, educational institutions, educators, and other stakeholders. Ongoing efforts are necessary to ensure that the rights and needs of learners with disability are fully addressed within the Philippine education system. Additionally, legal framework may evolve over time, and it is advisable to check for the latest update and amendments to to existing law and policies. So, to the success of this legal provision depends on their proper implementation, which requires collaboration between government agency, educational institution, educators, and stakeholders. So, ongoing efforts are necessary to ensure the rights uh, and needs of learners with disability are fully met in the Philippines education system. It is important to stay updated on the latest changes to the laws and policy as they may evolve over time.